woman walks through the airport. A service dog suddenly blocks her path, refuses to move. Moments later, he starts barking at a stroller. But when the blanket is pulled back, even security can't believe what's inside. Here's the full story. But before we get started, drop where in the world are you watching this down in the comments. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, go ahead, because what's coming next, you really don't want to miss it. The soft murmur of flight announcements echoed through the high ceilings of Terminal C at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Travelers bustled in every direction, rolling luggage, juggling coffee cups, eyes glued to departure screens. Beneath the sterile fluorescence, the airport pulsed with routine chaos. Amelia Kerr, a 36-year-old environmental scientist, stood near Gate C-22, quietly checking the boarding time for her flight to Seattle. She looked composed on the outside, gray slacks, a blue blouse, and practical boots. But her mind throbbed with distraction. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her sister. Amelia didn't read it. She just tapped it away, shoved the phone into her carry-on, and forced a long breath out of her chest. She was trying to focus, trying to get through this day. Beside her, a sleek Labrador retriever in a navy blue service vest sat with perfect posture, eyes locked onto Amelia with soft intensity. His name tag read, Zeke, Medical Alert Service Dog. Zeke had been Amelia's companion for 2 years. After a late-stage diagnosis of an autonomic nervous system disorder that triggered unpredictable heart rate crashes, she was matched with him through a veterans rehabilitation program, not for her military service, but because her case was considered severe and prone to syncope events. Zeke could detect changes in her vitals, sometimes before the heart monitors did, but Zeke wasn't looking at Amelia now. His gaze had shifted. Amelia noticed it too late. They were walking toward Gate C-24, when Zeke suddenly moved sideways, planting himself directly in front of Amelia's knees. She stopped mid-step, startled. "Zeke?" she muttered, trying to sidestep. Zeke stepped with her, blocking her path again. His body was firm, head low, eyes not on her, but staring past her right shoulder toward the boarding line for Flight 3792. Passengers behind her grumbled as she paused awkwardly in the walkway. A gate agent glanced over, puzzled. "Zeke, heel," she said gently, tapping her thigh. Zeke didn't budge. Instead, he released a low, sustained whine, the kind he was trained to use when detecting a medical emergency in someone nearby. But Amelia was fine. Her vitals were steady. She could feel that. Still, Zeke stood unmoving, his body language tense but not aggressive. His focus wasn't random. Amelia followed his gaze. He was locked onto a woman in her late 20s wearing oversized sunglasses, a long trench coat despite the warm spring air, and pulling a navy stroller. The stroller looked expensive, sleek and modern, with a blanket tucked neatly across the top. The woman was fourth in line to board the plane. Zeke let out a sharp bark. Amelia's heart skipped. Zeke never barked in public. It wasn't allowed. He had been trained out of it, except when issuing a Level 3 medical alert. Passengers turned. Some frowned. A few pulled back from Zeke, startled. The woman with the stroller flinched but didn't turn around. She adjusted the blanket on the stroller and moved forward in line. "Zeke," Amelia whispered firmly, bending down. "That's enough." Zeke barked again, this time louder. A TSA officer stationed by the nearby gate entrance looked over, frowning. He started walking toward them. Amelia's stomach twisted. "We're going to get stopped," she muttered to herself. But her instincts warred with her logic. Zeke had only barked like this once before, and that time it had saved a boy having an undetected hypoglycemic episode. Still, this was different. She was in an airport, on a tight schedule, and all eyes were on them. The TSA officer approached. "Mom, is everything all right with your dog?" Amelia straightened. "He's a medical alert dog. He's never done this before in public. I don't know why." Zeke barked again, facing the stroller, his body low and forward like he was preparing to move, but holding himself back on command. "Is your dog aggressive?" the officer asked, tensing. "No. He's alerting, but not for me. He does this when someone is in danger, medically." Amelia's voice trembled. "Please just just give me 1 second." The officer raised a brow. "He's targeting that woman's stroller?" "Yes, I don't know why." Another airport worker approached. "Mom, is there a problem?" The officer motioned toward the boarding gate. "Mom," he said to the woman with the stroller, "could we ask you to step out of line for a moment?" The woman stiffened. "I'm in a hurry," she snapped. "This is my flight." "I understand," the officer said calmly, "but we need to check on something. It'll just take a minute." "I have a baby," she said defensively, "and I don't want to disturb her." Zeke let out another bark, shorter this time, followed by a deep growl. People were staring now. Some were pulling their phones out. The terminal's energy shifted, a cocktail of curiosity, discomfort, and rising anxiety. Amelia felt the edge of panic tightening her chest. The woman turned slowly and pulled back the stroller's blanket halfway, revealing the baby's face, pale, still, eyes closed. "See?" she said. "She's sleeping. I don't know what your dog thinks he's doing." Amelia took a step forward, and that's when she saw it. The baby wasn't breathing. She stared, waiting to see the faint rise and fall of the chest. "Nothing." "Check her," Amelia said urgently. "Check the baby now." The TSA officer's eyes widened. He moved fast. The mother tried to pull the stroller back, but the second airport agent intervened, reaching into the stroller and gently lifting the infant. The moment the child was in the air, everything slowed. There was no cry, no motion. Zeke let out a heartbreaking whimper and sat back, body stiff and alert, eyes on the child. "Get medics!" the officer yelled. "Now!" Someone ran to the nearby emergency station. Another employee spoke rapidly into a walkie-talkie. A flight crew member guided passengers away from the gate. Amelia dropped her bag and rushed toward the group. "I'm trained in CPR. Let me help." The officer nodded, stepping aside. Amelia placed the baby gently on the floor and started her assessment. No breath. Pulse faint. She tilted the tiny head back and gave 2 rescue breaths, then began compressions. Small, fast, precise. The woman who had pushed the stroller was now sitting on the floor against the wall, trembling. Her face was blank. Too blank. No panic, no fear, just empty. People were whispering. But Amelia focused only on the small body beneath her hands and the rhythmic breaths she was trying to provide. Zeke sat beside her, unmoving, like a sentinel. The paramedics arrived less than 2 minutes later, storming through the crowd with bags and equipment. One of them, a tall man with a patch reading Hughes, knelt beside Amelia. "Keep compressions," he said. "We're getting the bag valve ready." Amelia nodded, not stopping. They worked fast. Zeke had already stepped back, sitting behind the paramedics, but never looking away. Within seconds, a monitor was placed on the baby's chest. The pulse returned, faint but stable. She was intubated and placed on oxygen, then carefully strapped onto a pediatric gurney. "She's alive," one paramedic whispered. Amelia slumped back, shaking. The team wheeled the child out toward the ambulance access tunnel. The woman, who still hadn't spoken, was quietly taken aside by airport police. One officer gently asked her name. "Danielle," she whispered. "Danielle Moss." But something about her story didn't line up. Her ID, when checked, belonged to someone else entirely. Another passenger who had noticed the stroller earlier stepped forward and said they had seen a man arguing with a woman holding that stroller outside the terminal earlier that morning. Airport security began pulling surveillance footage immediately. Zeke sat beside Amelia, leaning into her legs, applying gentle pressure, grounding her. She was shaking now, adrenaline crashing through her system. "I need a bottle of water," she whispered to no one in particular. The TSA officer returned. "Mom," the paramedic said, "your intervention helped stabilize the child before they arrived, and your dog." He paused, still awestruck. "He knew before anyone else." Amelia nodded, blinking away tears. "Zeke's never been wrong." Hartsfield-Jackson's Terminal C, once alive with routine commotion, now buzzed with low murmurs of disbelief. The flight to Seattle had been delayed. Gate C-24 was roped off, and security personnel moved deliberately, questioning witnesses and rerouting passengers. Amelia sat on a bench near the incident site, her hand resting on Zeke's head. The service dog lay pressed against her leg, his body calm now, though his alertness hadn't faded. She hadn't spoken much since the baby was rushed away by medics. Her palms still bore faint pink imprints from the compressions. That tiny chest. The weightless stillness. The moment she feared she was too late. Across from her, the woman, Danielle or whoever she truly was, sat in quiet custody of airport police, her back straight against the wall. Her hands shook, but not from grief, from something else. The baby had a name they'd learned. Lena, and Lena wasn't hers. One of the responding officers approached Amelia. He wore a plain black suit jacket over a TSA badge and introduced himself as Agent Marcus Harlan, Federal Air Marshal assigned to civilian affairs in transit zones. "Miss Kerr," he said gently, "I understand you and your service dog intervened." "Miss Kerr," he said gently. Amelia nodded. Zeke alerted to the baby. "He blocked me. Barked. He never does that unless it's serious. He only barks when he detects a dangerous medical situation." Agent Harlan gave a slight smile, glancing down at Zeke. He was right. She nodded again. She wasn't breathing. "I saw the footage," he said. "Your dog didn't hesitate. Impressive." He sat beside her, leaning forward slightly. "We're trying to piece together how this woman got through security with a child that isn't hers." The stroller wasn't tagged. No flight information on her boarding pass. "It looks like she bought a last-minute ticket, possibly under a fake name." Amelia tensed. "So the baby was abducted." Harlan's lips pressed into a line. "Possibly. We've notified missing children databases, but what's odd is this wasn't a planned exit strategy. Her behavior was erratic, almost frantic. She didn't react when the baby wouldn't wake," Amelia whispered. "She acted like she didn't care." "She might not have known the baby was unconscious," he said. "Or she knew and didn't know what to do about it." Zeke shifted beside Amelia, lifting his head toward the concourse as if expecting someone. Within minutes, a uniformed police officer and a distraught couple rushed through the restricted area, escorted by airport security. The woman was sobbing. The man's face was white with fear. Agent Harlan stood. "That's them," he said under his breath. The couple had arrived moments earlier after seeing an emergency alert that matched the baby's description. The real mother, Caitlin Marlowe, had stepped away briefly at a park near her apartment to answer a phone call. Her baby, asleep in the stroller beside the bench, had vanished when she turned back around. "I thought she was with my husband," she told police. "He thought I had her." The abduction had occurred just 1 hour before the scene at Gate C-24. The suspect had walked 6 blocks, hailed a cab to the airport, and attempted to board the next outgoing flight. And Lena had almost disappeared. If Zeke hadn't blocked Amelia, if she hadn't stopped, if she'd ignored the warning signs, the bark, the refusal to move, Lena might have been gone forever, or worse. The parents were rushed to the hospital to be with their daughter. Medical staff reported Lena was stabilizing. No lasting damage yet, though there were concerns about possible sedative traces found in her system. Toxicology results were pending. Amelia sat still for a long time after the couple left. The relief on their faces, the trembling gratitude was overwhelming. But her body felt like a balloon losing air, slowly collapsing under the emotional weight. Zeke nudged her hand gently. "You saved her," she whispered, barely audible. A sudden wave of emotion hit her. Zeke was trained for her emergencies, her fainting spells, her nerve misfires, her unpredictable heart rhythms. But today he had saved someone else's life, a baby he'd never seen before, a situation with no prior context, just scent, instinct, and unshakable purpose, and the haunting question lingered: what had that woman planned? Airport security footage was already circulating within federal databases. The woman, now confirmed to be Tess Holloway, age 29, had a prior mental health record. Her estranged sister had reported concerns to authorities 2 weeks prior, citing delusional episodes involving infants. Tess had once lost custody of her own child after a psych evaluation. It was believed she had been spiraling recently, possibly convincing herself Lena was her child reborn. She was now under psychiatric evaluation. The story was rapidly making its way to local and national media. News vans camped outside the airport. Commentators speculated about airport safety, mental health systems, and the uncanny instincts of service animals. But Amelia wanted none of it. She and Zeke sat quietly in a far corner of the airport's USO lounge, granted private space by a sympathetic airport manager. Her flight had long since departed. She didn't care. Zeke lay curled at her feet, now resting deeply, spent after hours of tension. Amelia sipped water slowly, eyes focused on the tiled floor. The scene kept replaying in her mind. The stroller, the lifeless baby, Zeke's growl, the mother's flat gaze. She hadn't even realized she was crying until a teardrop slid down the edge of her chin. There was a time she might have ignored him. Years ago, during her first few months with Zeke, she'd brushed off his alerts as overreactions. Sometimes he had simply stared at a person too long or whined gently when she passed a crowded street corner. She'd get embarrassed, tug him along, tell herself he was still learning. Zeke wasn't guessing. Zeke was reading signals she couldn't perceive. Amelia leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "I'm listening now," she whispered. Caitlin Marlowe sat beside her daughter's crib in the pediatric observation wing, gripping Lena's hand as she slept under observation. She still didn't fully understand what had happened. The police had only offered fragments: an abduction, an attempted airport departure, a stranger's dog that somehow knew what humans didn't, and then a woman, a stranger, who'd breathed life back into her daughter. Caitlin whispered her name to the night nurse. "I want to meet her," the woman with the dog. "We're trying to track her down," the nurse said. "I believe she's still at the airport," but Amelia wasn't answering her phone. She'd turned it off. Amelia finally left the terminal, walking slowly toward her car under the yellow glow of parking garage lights. The storm had passed, but the weight remained. She opened the passenger door and patted the seat. Zeke jumped in and curled up without hesitation. Before starting the engine, Amelia leaned back in her seat, letting the silence wrap around her. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. She played it. A trembling voice spoke. "Hi, this is Caitlin Marlowe. I'm the mother of the baby you saved. I don't know how to thank you. I'm sitting beside her now. She's okay. Because of you. Because of your dog. Please, if you get this, call me back. I need to say this in person. I want to meet Zeke. Please." The message ended. Amelia stared out the windshield for a long moment, then finally whispered, "We'll call her tomorrow." Zeke stirred, resting his chin on her arm. The morning sun cast pale gold through the lobby windows of St. Joseph's Children's Hospital, brushing warmth across the otherwise sterile floor tiles. Nurses moved softly in their Crocs, clipboards in hand, conversations hushed. It was early, and few visitors had arrived. The world outside was still stirring awake. Inside room 4C, a small figure slept quietly. A baby, barely a year old, her breathing rhythmic now, chest rising with soft assurance. Caitlin Marlowe sat in a nearby chair, sleep-deprived but unwavering in her watch. Her husband, Mark, had gone downstairs for coffee. Every moment felt like borrowed time, a second chance wrapped in quiet miracles. She had nearly lost her child, and the thought still made her arms clench as if to anchor herself in reality. Then a soft knock. She looked up. The nurse from last night stepped in and smiled gently. "They're here," she said. Caitlin stood quickly. Outside the room, standing just beyond the doorway, was Amelia Kerr. Her hair was tied back in a loose knot, and dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept either. Her service dog Zeke stood beside her, calm, watchful, his eyes instantly sweeping the room with quiet alertness. Caitlin's breath caught as their eyes met. Amelia hesitated. "I wasn't sure if I should come." Caitlin walked toward her, heart pounding. But she didn't speak. She wrapped her arms around Amelia wordlessly and held her, the kind of embrace that goes beyond language, the kind born of deep, soul-gripping gratitude. It took several long seconds before Caitlin whispered through her tears, "You saved her. Your dog. You gave her back to me." Amelia swallowed hard. "Zeke did," she said, her voice cracking. "I just listened." Caitlin stepped back, wiping her face, and knelt beside Zeke. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to stroke his head. Zeke stayed perfectly still, as if sensing the reverence in the moment. "Thank you," Caitlin whispered to him. "Thank you for seeing what none of us did." Zeke pressed his head gently into her hand. Amelia watched silently. She didn't need to explain what Zeke had done, not to this mother. She could feel it in Caitlin's trembling voice, in the way she touched the dog as if touching a sacred being. Then Caitlin stepped aside. "Would you like to see her?" Amelia nodded. She walked slowly to the bedside. The baby, Lena, looked smaller than she remembered. Pale cheeks, fine blonde hair, a monitor gently tracking vitals nearby, but she was breathing. Her lips had color. She was warm. Amelia touched her tiny foot. Zeke sat at her side, unmoving but intensely alert. "I couldn't sleep last night," Caitlin said behind her. "I kept imagining what would have happened if you weren't there. If your dog hadn't." She couldn't finish. "There was something wrong in her scent," Amelia said quietly without looking away from the child. "Zeke picks up on chemical changes, usually in me, but sometimes in others too. Once he alerted to a stranger having a silent stroke at a gas station. And now this," Caitlin said. "There was something wrong in her scent," Amelia said quietly without looking away from the child. "Zeke picks up on chemical changes, usually in me, but sometimes in others too. Once he alerted to a stranger having a silent stroke at a gas station. And now this," Caitlin said. Amelia gave a faint nod. "This was different, though. He blocked me. He made a decision. It wasn't part of his training. He acted like someone who knew what was at stake." A pause settled between them. "He's not just a dog," Caitlin said, more to herself than anyone. "He's something else." The hospital administrators had received full reports from airport authorities. Tess Holloway, the woman who attempted to abduct Lena, had a long documented history of schizoaffective disorder, compounded by recent trauma. She had gone off medication weeks ago. She was now in custody under psychiatric evaluation. In her apartment, police found dozens of old baby clothes, cribs, and photographs. Most disturbing of all was a photo of Lena, torn from a community newsletter mailed out by a local parenting group. Caitlin's heart stopped when they told her. She'd been watching us, Caitlin said, gripping her husband's hand. She planned this, and yet no amount of planning had accounted for Zeke. The media storm had hit full throttle by the time the story reached national headlines. The footage of Zeke standing firm in front of Amelia, barking at the stroller, had gone viral. News anchors called him a canine hero. Others labeled him the dog who saved a stranger's child. But Amelia wasn't interested in attention. She declined interviews. She ignored most emails. She simply wanted things to return to quiet normalcy. Then, a letter arrived, handwritten, from Caitlin. Inside was a photo of Lena, smiling, vibrant, and fully recovered, dressed in a soft onesie with a pattern of little black Labrador puppies. The note read, "No words will ever be enough. But every time I look at Lena, I will think of Zeke and of you. Thank you for not walking past us. Thank you for trusting him when everyone else hesitated. You gave my daughter her future back. She'll grow up knowing that not all heroes wear capes. Some wear vests and fur, and some don't speak at all. With all our love, Caitlin and Lena." Amelia wept as she read it. Zeke sat quietly at her feet. A month had passed. The cherry blossoms were in bloom again at Grant Memorial Park. Children laughed on the swings. Parents strolled with strollers, just like Caitlin had done that day. Amelia walked the path slowly, Zeke beside her. She wasn't meeting anyone. She just needed air. As she reached the top of the hill overlooking the lake, a familiar voice called out, "Amelia?" She turned. Caitlin was standing there, Lena in a carrier on her chest, and Mark not far behind. "I didn't expect to see you," Amelia said. "We come here sometimes now," Caitlin said, "just to breathe, to remind ourselves how lucky we are." Amelia smiled faintly. Zeke approached Lena gently. The baby, now awake and playful, reached out with tiny fingers and grabbed hold of his ear. Zeke stayed still. Then, for the first time in weeks, he wagged his tail. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but it meant everything. Not all bonds are forged in words. Some are formed in moments of instinct, in decisions made when no one else is watching, in choices grounded in trust. Amelia had almost pulled Zeke away that day. She had almost dismissed his warning, but she didn't. She stood her ground. She trusted her dog not because he barked, not because he blocked her path, but because something deeper told her this wasn't noise, this was purpose. That trust had changed the trajectory of a child's life. It had redefined a mother's future. It had proven that in a world full of distraction and doubt, sometimes the quietest voice is the one that saves you. Sometimes that voice has 4 legs, soft fur, and a heart that listens better than any human ever could. And if you thought this story was the type of stories you like, wait till you see what Zeke does tomorrow. It's even more unbelievable. So hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Trust me, you'll want to be here when it drops.